We are live. Okay, everybody. Everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, super.
Yeah.
Right. Welcome again. Another London Excel Meetup. Today we've got Oakley Turvey with us to show us how to customize Excel to get the most of it, create our own version of Excel, and not the one we get straight out of the gate that apparently fits all. So this should be quite interesting. You know, something a little bit different to the typical sessions. So should be good. Looking forward to it. Not too much for me to ramble on about here. So it'll be the usual process. We'll have the presentation. You know, any questions you guys have, put them into the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to deal with them there, or we'll pass them over to Oakley at you know, at an interval that suits, whether it's relevant to what he's talking about, or maybe leave it to the end if not, and we'll kind of clean anything else up and cover what's needed. There's one more session coming before this year is out, and we kind of close 2020 in respect of this meetup. That is 2 weeks' time from today. Today's Tuesday, isn't it? Which is pivot tables. Paula, who I'm not sure she's here at the moment or not, I haven't seen her arrive, but she'll be with us. You know, she's a regular member here, Excel MVP. A lot of you know her, but she'll be delivering some stuff from pivot tables. So a bit of a kind of masterclass there, if you will. I'm sure most of us have used them before, but there's always kind of techniques or ways we use this stuff that we can benefit from. That will be our last one of the year. I'm hoping to maybe do something a little bit fun on that session as well, but we'll see. Let's not put pressure on myself. And that will close it off, and then we'll hit next year. Hit next year good, and maybe even get to London next year. Who knows, eh? Put London in the meetup. At the moment, it's just full Excel in the meetup. London on the lowdown. Right, I'm going to switch over to the man himself, Oaks, to come and introduce himself and take us through our material for the day. As I say, engage in the chat. It's always interactive, these sessions. Good to hear from you. Don't be worried about asking questions or getting involved. Oakley, if I can stop my share and pass over to you, buddy.
No worries, I'll share my screen. And I'm just going to dive into PowerPoint. Can everyone hear me okay? Anybody not hear me, just give Alan a shout, pop something in the chat. He'll sort it out with his magic wizardry, whatever he is. And so as always, I'm going to start off and tell you who I am. So I'm not going to tell you a huge amount about that. There's my name. People call me Oaks. It's less of a mouthful than Oakley. What do I do? Well, I teach people how to do stuff at work. So I primarily do that. So I teach people IT skills and other staff skills that they might need at their workplace. I've got a company called Academy Training Solutions, and officially I'm supposed to be some kind of Excel expert and also a master instructor. So Microsoft Office Specialist Master Instructor. Now, anybody in the know will realize that that title hasn't existed since 2013, because Microsoft are in the habit of changing the names of things. But I like that one because it sounds really quite impressive. But in reality, I'm just a hobbyist. I just play with Excel. But we shouldn't put down people who describe themselves as an amateur, because actually, amateurs are people who do things for the love of it. So I don't do something because I have to do it to make money, because if I did Excel just to make money, I'd probably cut corners and do it just for what was good enough. I tend to try and do a good solution to get it right, because I love doing it. I've got a YouTube channel, and if you just look for me as Oakley Turvey on YouTube, you'll find a whole bunch of videos there. A lot of them are to do with AutoCAD, because that's actually really where I started. And I've also got a few on programming, but it's really bad programming, because I program just to get something done rather than to do it exactly right for something I'm going to sell as part of a for example, Microsoft program. So please don't criticize my programming too much. I'm a huge fan of the internet. I think the internet is, we could describe it as the sum of all human knowledge at the moment, but we shouldn't also assume that everything you see on the internet is right, because that would be assuming that all human knowledge is right. And I think history has shown that that ain't the case. Here we are. This is what we're going to be doing today. So if anybody remembers this TV show, what it was a bunch of guys who took cars and they converted them and customized them to suit what they want to do, to show off and those kind of things. And that's what we're going to be doing today for Excel. So without any further ado, let's just dive straight into it. So I hit that button and it opens Excel. And what we're going to do to start with is, let's just imagine you've only just got your first brand new copy of Excel, or you've just had an update and you've got a new version or something like that. So we're going to run through some of the things that you should probably set up in Excel in order to do that. And the first thing I want to look at is the status bar. So down at the bottom of your screen, here is the status bar. So that's the bar that runs along the bottom there. And it's actually got some useful stuff on it. So if I select a bunch of cells there, I can see something about the selection I've made. But there's a lot more information there as well, which is not being shown at the moment. Now, for example, if I go into edit a cell, it tells me over here that I'm in enter mode. Now, what it also does is it grays out half the buttons on the ribbon, because I can't activate a command unless Excel is ready for me to do a command. I can't use any keyboard shortcuts. Now, if you watch that button where it says enter, if I press escape, it now goes back to ready mode and lets me do stuff on the screen. So it lets me enter a command. What it means is the machine is ready for me to give it a command. Now, there's actually loads of other stuff like that as well, but you're never going to see it unless you turn it on. Now, if you right click in the status bar, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. And my advice to people is just go in there, turn everything on. So initially, turn everything on. And then as you work through, if you find something that's not useful, then turn it off. But if you never see it, you're never going to know whether it's useful or not. So let's now have a look at what it does. So if I select that same range of numbers, I've now got a whole bunch of other stuff that comes up. So not just the same things down here, but I've also now got the smallest number in the range and the biggest number in the range. Now, I've also got some of these things over on the left. They actually light up when I hover over them. So if I hover over that button there and click on it, it's actually a button that does something. So it's not just information that it's giving me. I can actually interact with this bar at the bottom as well to get some actions, basically. Now, one that I find really useful is that one there. If I click there, that starts recording a macro. Now, that's really useful because when I'm recording a macro, that turns into stop recording. And what that means is I can stop recording the macro from any ribbon without having to change back to my developer tab to actually stop recording the macro, which can be useful if you're on another tab and you've actually forgotten that you're recording a macro, and then 2 hours later you look up and realize you've just recorded the last 2 hours of what you did. Now, the other thing you might find is down here, you might find some things that you don't very often use. Now, if I right click here and scroll down to the bottom, I've got my shortcuts down here, which change the way I view stuff in Excel on the screen. Now, I don't use them because on the view ribbon or the page layout ribbon, I can change them there anyway. Now, there's also the zoom slider, which some people love, but I'm not a fan of it. I never use it because I zoom in with control and then just roll the wheel on the mouse. Now, the last one is the zoom itself. Now, I don't care that I'm zoomed into 220% because I'm zoomed into that much. I don't care what the number is. I'm zoomed into that much. If I want to zoom in more, I zoom in more. If I want less, I zoom out a bit. But like I say, if you turn everything on, you can then have the option to turn them off if you don't use them. But if you never turn them on, you're never going to know even that they're there or not. Okay. The next one we're going to have a look at is copy and paste. Now, you might say, well, what on earth can I set up for copy and paste? But actually, there's a lot of things in here, provided they work, that are really, really useful. Now, we have a section here for clipboard. What most people never see is that little button there that you can click to fly out the clipboard. Now, this is an Office clipboard. It's not just Microsoft Excel. And if you go down to the options, what you can do is you can tell it to collect without showing the clipboard. Or you could say, show the clipboard when you do Control CC. Now what happens in the clipboard is if I copy something, it's going to go into the clipboard. If I copy something else, that also goes into the clipboard. And even if I have them deselected, for the rest of the day, when I've got this computer open, I can now paste those things at will by simply clicking on them in my clipboard. And I don't have to have the clipboard open because I told it to keep copying stuff even without the clipboard open. The bottom two buttons I checked over here mean that I've got the clipboard icon coming up on the right-hand side of my screen, and I can see how many things I've got in the clipboard. It tells me when I add a new one that I've got a certain number out of 24, so I can have a maximum of 24 things in my clipboard at a time. Now that's 24 copies, it's not 24 individual words or individual cells. It's 24 times I've done the copy. Okay. Next thing we might want to do is we might want to look and say, what's your name and what's the style that you use for your Excel? Now, I've got a little bit of code that runs there when I hit that button, and it goes and finds my username. But what is the username? Well, this is the name that's going to be recorded when I create a new workbook. That's going to be the author of the new workbook or the name of the person who modifies a workbook. Now, where is this actually stored and why do we care? Well, if we go into File and Options, down here, it says the username. Now, if we've got a work setup, that might actually be coming up with your email address, your company email address, rather than your actual name that you want to put in there. So it does give you the option to change it so it just says your name, whatever you want to be known as, and then say, always use this irrespective of how I've signed into Office. So that's also useful if you've got different versions of Office, is it will always say that you are who you are. Now, also when we're in the same place, we've got an option here for a background setting that we might want to put on there. Now, this is not one that I use, and I'll show you why. If I click on there and I say, well, let's pick one. Let's say, oh, school supplies. That looks like fun. So school supplies, and I click OK, and if anyone looks really, really hard, you can just about see at the top of the screen behind the green, you can see a bunch of pictures of pens and paper. Now, if I go to my file ribbon, you can actually see it a lot clearer because I've got a nice clear background behind it. But I'm not really a fan of that. I can't really see the point of that. So I'm going to change mine back to no background. But the next one down from there is, what theme do I want to use? Now, at the moment, my Excel comes up as green, and it's not particularly good to see stuff, especially if I'm presenting and I've got a big class and the people far away who maybe have, you know, some kind of short-sighted eye problem, something like that. So I can change it into a different view, which might be a high contrast view, just to make it easier for people to see stuff from distance. That's also a good tip if anyone's presenting something, you might want to change the background to make it easier for people to see. Now, Microsoft in their wisdom have still made it so that stuff highlights in this lovely shade of gray. I'm not really sure that that's highlighting. It used to be highlighted in yellow, which was really easy for anybody to see, but now they've made it highlight in gray. And that's something you have to be careful of if you go in and you change it to a black setting, because then it's really difficult to see what's actually highlighted at all, because the color it highlights in is almost exactly the same as the background color. Now I'm going to change mine back to what they call colorful, which is the standard Excel color. Now, just over on the right-hand side, we have a chart. Now, if I was to say to you, what color is the first bar in the chart? Everyone's going to say blue. And I'm going to say, no, it's not. It's in color 1. And what color is that little line over there? You're going to say it's orange. I'm going to say, no, it's not. It's in color 2. And the gray, I'm going to say, what color is that? And no one's going to answer because you're going to feel you're going to get tricked. And I'm going to say, yes, you're right. It's color 3. Now, why is that relevant? Well, if I copy this chart and paste it into PowerPoint, the colors will probably change because my PowerPoint might have a theme set up for my company theme. So what almost nobody does is set a theme in Excel, which is a company branded theme within Excel. So let's have a quick look and see how we do that. That's on the page layout. And I can say, do you know what? I want to change my theme and I want to change the colors. Now here's a whole bunch of colors. And as I hover over, we get the live preview showing me how the different colors will feed through. But that's not what I want. I want to customize these and put my company branded colors on there. So I'm going to say, this is my color 1, called accent 1, but it's color 1. I'm going to make that gold. My accent 2, well, I'm going to leave that as it is, but my accent 3, I'm going to make that a darker gray. Now down the bottom, because I've changed it, it comes up as custom. So I'm going to call it ATSL, so Academy Training Solutions Limited, and click Save. So that would now be a company branded color scheme. Now tied in with the same thing, I can go up here and I can say, do you know what? We also use a company font. And I'm going to say Customised font. Now, most of the time in PowerPoint, we have heading fonts and we have body fonts, but almost all of what we use in Excel is actually in body font. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to pick an Arial, let's say an Arial rounded MT bold. Could use a company font. And again, I might give that a name, a custom name again, and hit save. You'll notice that font has now been applied throughout. Now you've also got the option to change effects on images. I really don't find that useful, so I tend to leave the effects alone. But what I do want to do is I want to save this all as a theme. So I'll come across to the themes, and rather than using one of these, which changes it to another preset theme, I'm going to say save this at current theme, and I'm going to call it ATSL. Guess what? Now this has gone to a special location. It's gone to my templates location automatically, and I don't want to change that location because that's where Microsoft look for my themes. So now I've got that theme saved, I can get a document from someone else and I can basically hijack it and turn it into my company theme just with a click of a button. So if I work for one company and produce some fantastic stuff and then go and work for a different company, I can use that same stuff and just change it into a different theme. Likewise, if you work for different customers, so you're working as a consultant for multiple different customers, you can brand all of your Excel into their own themes really easily. Okay, let's go back over here. The next thing we're going to have a look at is how you auto-correct things. So my company name is Academy Training Solutions Limited. Now, it's not only a bit of a mouthful, it's also quite a lot to type in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool which is basically the spell checker, the automatic spell checker. And every time I type in ATSL dot, it's going to change it into Academy Training Solutions Limited. Now I find this really useful because I hate typing. So I go into File and Options, and this is a proofing option. And I'm going to say Autocorrect. Now what I want to do is I want to replace ATSL dot with Academy Training Solutions Limited. Now I add that in, it's gone into my autocorrect. So now when I type in ATSL, as soon as I press enter, it will automatically correct that and put it in as Academy Training Solutions Limited. Now that's fantastic. Now that was actually designed as a feature for if we make spelling mistakes. So if we make a common spelling mistake, the machine will automatically pick that up and auto-correct it to something else. But how does it know what language we're working in? Because if I were to say to people, which one there is spelled correctly, half the audience would say one, half the audience would say the other. And if I do F7 for my spell check, at the moment, because I'm set up with my dictionary language being English UK, it's picking up the color with just an O as a spelling mistake. And it's suggesting the other one. Now, if I were to change that into my US dictionary, it picks it up the other way around. So it picks up with the U as a spelling mistake and suggests without as the answer. Now, that's quite useful to change. So actually, where do we change it? File, Options, Proofing. And you can choose your custom dictionaries here. and you can choose which dictionary you have and what you're using as a default. Now, tied in with that, we don't just have dictionaries, we actually have a region of language. Now, the region and language are quite different things. Let's talk about the language first of all. Now, the language is the language and the words it uses on the controls, the dialog boxes, and pretty much everywhere within Excel. When Excel is trying to communicate with me, mine speaks to me in English. But what if English was my second language and I found it more comfortable to read all these commands in a different language? Well, I could go to File and Options, and I can go to Language, and I can change what language it actually chooses as the Office display. Now here also I've got the authoring and proofing languages. So these are my spell checker and things like that. But this is my display language. Now I mentioned that the regional settings are not the same as your language settings. So if I were to say, how do we put in a date in Excel? Again, half the audience would tell me one thing, and probably I'd get about 15 different answers from the audience, because people live in different countries and different countries have different ways of putting the dates in. And we all know the American way is obviously wrong. Now, the correct answer to this is not any specific way. The correct answer to this is, how do you put a date in Excel? Well, you put it in like it says in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Because however it's written in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, that's how Excel is expecting you to put in a date. Now, why is it important? Well, it's important because in my version of Excel, that is a date. That is today's date. As soon as I come away from that cell, Excel analyzes what I've put in and it says, hey, I know that's a date. So it goes to the right-hand side of the cell. So I can now do maths and use date functions on that date. If I was in Germany and I typed it in like that, when I press enter, it doesn't go anywhere. Because in my computer, that's not a date, that's just some text. So although I might be really familiar with seeing that and understanding that it's a date, it's not a date and I can't use any of the date features. Now, why is that important? Well, we're working quite internationally and we have a lot of files that come from different places in the world. So we might need to work in a region setting at one point and another region setting at another point. Now, if we're using Power Query, that's really easy because we use something called locale, and we set this data type to a certain locale, and it will then convert it into my regional settings. But how do we actually change our regional settings? Well, you'll notice that it's not part of my Excel window. It's actually outside of the Excel window, which means it's not an Excel setting. It's actually a Windows setting. Now, if I type the Windows key and then start typing, you'll notice I get the option to change my region settings. And I can then change it to a different region settings. And these are the things that will be affected by how my dates appear, calendars I use, and all sorts of features like that. Okay. Next thing we're going to have a look at is another one that catches people out. We've got different places we can save to by default. So if I want to save my workbook, the first thing you might notice is that we now have an auto save button at the top. Now, this is not the same as auto save used to be, and it's not the same as auto recover. So people used to say, well, I set mine to auto save every 10 minutes or every 2 minutes. That way I don't lose any data when it crashes. This auto save will actually save pretty much as soon as you've made a change. But it does mean you need to have the file saved in a OneDrive location. Now, the reason for this is because if you share the file with somebody else and you've got it saved on OneDrive with autosave turned on, you can both see each other working and see the changes you're making pretty much live, because as soon as you've made a change, it's saved and therefore the other person sees it straight away. But you might not want to do that. You might want to actually make it save on your computer. So how do people save? Well, people go and they say file and they say save as, and then they say browse. And by the time they get there, I'm already bored, because the quickest way of saving is hit the F12 button. So if you're in a file and you press F12, it straight away takes you into this save location, which is the last folder you've used. Or if you've not actually used a folder so far, It is whatever you've set as a default save location. So where is the default save location? Well, if we go to File and Options and Save, we can actually set our default save location to wherever we want. Now, although it says it's a local file location, it can be somewhere on a network. So if you're working in a shared environment, you could save your files in that location by default. Now we do have underneath there another default templates location. We're going to come back to that one later on. In addition to the save location, we might want to tell the machine to save to my computer by default and not to the OneDrive by default. Now, why would that be important? Well, actually, the difference is if it saves to my computer, it then synchronizes my computer's location to OneDrive, whereas if it saves to OneDrive, it then synchronizes the OneDrive location to my computer. Why you might want to do one or the other is entirely up to you. If you want to save to your computer by default, again, File Options, Save, and you've got the button to check to say Save to the computer by default. Now, whilst we're here, let's also have a look at the file type that we might want to save it as, because the default file type is XLSX, and it says save files in this format. But if you're regularly recording macros or writing VBA, you might get bored of actually having to change the file type every time you save a file. So change it here to XLSM by default, and then all your files will be saved as potentially macro enabled if you need them to be. What I would say don't do is don't change your default file format to something like a CSV or any of these other file formats which might lose data when you save in that format. That's a special one for anybody who works for Public Health England. Okay. Now, as I said, we do have a template location there as well, and we will come back to it. You'll see I've got a tab here for templates where we'll talk about what is a proper template. Now, this is another favorite of mine. Stay in cell on enter. Now, why do I want to do that? Well, let's say I'm in a cell. So I'm in this cell here, which says active cell, and I press enter. What happens? Well, I go to the cell below. Or I don't press enter, I press tab. I go to the cell to the right. Now, why does that matter? Why do we care? Well, most of the time when I'm typing something into a cell, I might be typing a formula into the cell. And when I press enter, I then have to go back to the cell in order to fill the formula down. Now, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is change it so that as soon as I type something in the cell and press enter, it stays in the cell so I don't have to reselect that same cell. Now, the experienced users will say, hey, you just do Control Enter. That's great. You don't need to just press enter. That works. That's fine. But we can actually change the way that Excel operates. So I can say on my advanced ribbon, after pressing enter, move the selection, and I can choose where I want to move it to. But unfortunately, I don't have the choice that says don't move anywhere in this drop-down. But that's because I just uncheck the box there. So if I don't tell it to move after I've pressed enter, when I'm in a cell and I press enter, it stays in the cell. Now I can just double click there to fill down. Now, of course, if you're doing your workbook properly and you're working with tables, you'll actually have a formula that you type into a cell, and as soon as you press enter, it will automatically fill that formula down the whole column anyway. Okay, let's have a look at another thing that's on the advanced setting there. Now, over here on the right, if I have the word Monday, M-O-N, if I drag it to the right, it tells me Tuesday, because in England, Tuesday follows Monday. Now, when I say in England, in France, it doesn't, because in France, they don't use the word Monday, they use a different word. So that also is tied in with your regional settings for your computer. Now, where is this actually stored? Well, if I go over here to File, Options, and Advanced, if I scroll right down to the bottom, here there's a section for my custom lists. Now, if I click on Edit Custom Lists, I can see that I have my days of the week and my months of the year there already in that list. Now, what we want to do is make a new list for our team members. So let's say I have 3 people in the team. I have Bill, Joe, and Fred. And when I drag Bill to the right, I want to see Joe and then Fred. So I can just type them in, Bill, Joe, and Fred, if I can spell. And now when I hit OK, that will get added to my list and it will close this window down. Now I like to hit add first of all, so that I can see the list being added and then hit OK, but it will do it if you just press OK. Now that list will now be added to my computer. It's nothing to do with the worksheet I'm working on or the workbook I'm working on. So any workbook I have open now, if I type in Bill, I can drag it to the right and it will say Bill, Joe, Fred, Bill, Joe, Fred, Bill, Joe, Fred. Now it doesn't matter which direction I drag this in, it will cycle up and down through the list. Now, the other example we might use is we might have a bunch of different departments in our organization. Now, what I've done here is I already have a list of departments, so I've selected them. And now I'm going to go back to that same area, File, Options, Advanced, scroll right down to the bottom, click on Custom List. Now, because I had a range already selected, it's already picked up that range, and all I have to do is hit Import, and it brings them all in as a new custom list. And now when I click OK and OK, I can drag HR to the right, and it's going to cycle through that list, which is great. Okay. Next thing we're going to have a look at is how we customize this interface itself. Now, right at the top, we've got something called the Quick Access Toolbar. Now, this row of buttons along here is the Quick Access Toolbar. Now, why do we even have them there? Well, these are buttons that always stay there. Doesn't matter what ribbon we're on. So that's quite handy. Common things that we use, we don't have to change ribbons to actually get there. Now, whenever I ask people, do you ever use any buttons up there? Yes, we use the save and we use the undo. And they're probably the two that you really don't need to use. You don't even need up there because they've got really easy keyboard shortcuts. But if we don't know what a keyboard shortcut is for something, we can always hover over the button and the machine will tell us what it is in brackets. Now, how can we add extra stuff up there? Well, most people tell me that there's a little button there you can click on and you can tick extra things here, and they will also be on your Quick Access Toolbar. But what a lot of people don't realize is you can right-click on any button and add it to your Quick Access Toolbar. So whatever button you want, if you can see it on a ribbon, you can right-click on it and add it to the Quick Access Toolbar. And then you can use it really quickly from any ribbon you're on. But more importantly, what you can do is you can use keyboard shortcuts like the Alt keyboard shortcut. So I just pressed and released Alt. And now if I wanted that button, I would just press 5. So Alt 5 would be my keyboard shortcut for that button there, which is the word wrap. Now, the other thing I can do is I can go there and I can say more commands. Now, rather than me just choosing a command from here, which is the popular commands, I can go here and say all commands. Now, this is quite clever because actually there's lots and lots of commands in here now. So not just about the 50 that were there before, but hundreds, including some which are not on any ribbon. So these are the commands that have been deprecated in this version of Excel. The commands are still there, but there's no button for them. So one that I'm going to use is this one here, select visible cells. I click add. I've now got that button there and it's going to go next to my wrap text. So I'll click OK. There's the button there. Now, how does this work? Well, actually, if I select a couple of cells there and I copy, if I come down here and paste, I actually copied 3 cells because I've got a hidden row there. So when I select cells, I'm actually selecting the hidden one as well. Now, if I've selected those cells and I hit my magic button up there, and now I do copy and paste, I only copied what was visible because I changed my selection to select only the visible cells. Now, if you remember, I had that keyboard shortcut, I can press Alt and the number 6, and that will do the same. So that has now selected the visible cells only. Okay. That's the Quick Access Toolbar. What you might also want to do is customize the ribbon. Now, how do we customize the ribbon? Well, we just come up somewhere inside the ribbon and right click and say customize the ribbon. Now, why would we do this? Well, it might be that every week we have to produce a report and we have to jump around 10 different ribbons to actually get all the buttons and commands that I need for that single report. Well, why not put them all on a single ribbon? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose, let's say, my home ribbon, and I'm going to say make a new tab. And I'm straight away going to go in, right click on the new tab and rename it. And it's going to be called Oaks, because I'm really imaginative like that. So it's called Oaks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the group that's gone into the ribbon. And if you notice on the ribbon itself, there are no buttons just on the ribbon. All of the buttons are inside a group with a group name. So I'm going to make sure that I've got my new group. I'm going to rename this as well, and I'm going to call it Report. Now, at the moment, that will be useless because it's a brand new ribbon, but with no buttons on there. So what I'm going to do is put some commands on that new ribbon, and I make sure I put the commands in the group, not just on the ribbon. And I'm going to say I want that one. I probably want a pivot table. And I don't know, probably want to set a print area, something like that. So now when I click OK, I have my new ribbon. I click on there. I've got all the commands I need for producing my report, all on the ribbon that I'm using. Now, if you do this properly, what you can do is you can then go in and turn off the other buttons or the other tabs because you don't need them anymore, because all of the stuff that you're going to use, you've got on your own custom ribbon. Okay, we're getting onto some exciting stuff now. Pivot tables. We all love a good pivot table. Now, how do we make a pivot table? Well, I just click inside the data, Alt-N-V, enter, boom, there's a new pivot table. Now, it's put a new pivot table with the default settings, which is on a new sheet. And when I actually turn this into a pivot table, it's going to use my default settings for that pivot table. And I hate these default settings. The reason I hate them is because at the top it says column labels. It doesn't say these are months. It says row labels. It doesn't say these are salespeople. And perhaps I don't want the totals at the bottom of the columns because of the thing that I'm doing with my pivot tables. So I'm going to change these. I'm going to go into the design ribbon. I'm going to change the design of this pivot table. I'm going to say I want the report layout to be in tabular form. And I don't want the grand totals on the columns. I just want it on for the rows only. Now what I'm going to do is make sure I stay in that pivot table. I've got this set up as I want. So now I'm going to change it in the machine so that every time I make a new pivot table, it's going to be structured like that. We go to File, Options, and this time we're going to go to Data. I'm going to go to Edit the default layout for pivot tables. Now, because I've just done it to give an example, I can now import from the pivot table that's at the example I've given it, rather than me having to worry about what these different settings mean. So if I hit import, you'll notice these settings have changed. Now, when I say OK, the next time I go and make a pivot table, it's going to have these settings, so it will be in tabular form. It will have only the totals on the rows and not on the columns. And I know Paula's doing something on pivot tables in a couple of weeks, so she'll probably cover the same again. Now, once we've done pivot tables, we're going to have a look at something called trusted documents and trusted locations. So I'm going to come down here, and this is something called the Trust Center. I'm aware those are probably too small to see. So let's actually go into the Trust Center. File, Options, and Trust Center. And now every time we open a file that comes from anywhere that could remotely be suspicious, like the internet, like email, like anywhere that's not my machine, I'm going to get a warning bar telling me I need to enable editing before I can do anything in that file. If the file has any code on it, like macros, I'm also going to have to enable the macros before I'm allowed to run them. Now that does also depend on the trust settings that you've got set up. But once you've enabled that, that document becomes what we call a trusted document. Now in here we have all of our trusted documents. Now we can't go through them one by one and turn them on or off. But what we can do is not trust any of them. So if I hit that clear button, it not trust every document that I've got, and every document I now open, it will come up with the yellow warning bar again, and it will start making them trusted again one by one. Now, the other thing to look at is the trusted locations, because any file I open from these locations is automatically trusted. Now, the thing here is I can add a new location. Now, what I've actually seen people do is they say, do you know what, the place I'd like to be trusted is my downloads folder. That's the worst place in the world to trust, because that's where all the stuff you've downloaded from the internet goes into. Don't ever make your downloads folder or your desktop a trusted location. You might not even be allowed to do this by your organization's policy settings. So just be aware of that. Now, also in the same area, we've got add-ins. Now, I've actually got an add-in on my Excel. I've got Monkey Tools, you can see there. Now, if I go to add-ins, we have a few different types of add-ins, but the two that I use more than any are the Excel add-ins and the COM or component add-ins. Now, for those two there, sometimes you're going to need administrator privileges to actually install them. But it does depend on how the add-in has been written. And that one there has been written in such a way that you probably don't need admin permission to actually install the add-in. You can just go in here, look for the COM add-in. That's a component add-in. So COM add-in, you can hit go, or you can just download it and install it straight away. Now, what are add-ins? Well, they're extra stuff. It's a bunch of code that runs, that creates extra ribbons, just like we did our own custom ribbon, but it does it automatically for you. And there's a bunch of buttons on the ribbons that might automatically run some code. So it might be code that's not stored in any workbook, but it's stored within the add-in. And you can do that yourself. You can make your own add-in. If you've written some VBA, you can save it as an Excel add-in, and then people can install it as an add-in. Okay, let's now talk about proper templates. So what is a proper template? Well, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not a file, which is an Excel file, called template. And it's amazing how many times you see that, or a file, which is an Excel file called my monthly report. Now, it might be that this is how I want to start every time I do my monthly report, but what I don't do is have it as an Excel file. I have it as a template file. So let's just isolate all of this first of all. So this is just a single file. This is an Excel file called my template. Now, if I want this to actually be a template, I need to save it as a template file. Now, what's the difference? Well, the difference is if I open this file, and maybe it's last month's report, if I paste in the data for this month, make some changes and hit save, I've just overwritten last month's report. And I'm sure lots of people are familiar with having done that. If this was a template, and when I'm doing my monthly report, I say make a new file based on that template, I can never overwrite the report accidentally because it becomes a new file. So let's see how we do that. So at the moment, this is my template XLSX. I'm going to say save as, remember that's F12, and it's going to go into a certain location. Now that's the last used location. I'm going to say save it as a template. Now, if I've got macros, I might say macro enabled. This one doesn't have. So I'm going to say just save it as an Excel template. And it's automatically going to change the location for me. Now, what you mustn't do is change this location again yourself. Remember that empty box we looked at earlier on in the file save? It's created a new location for me. So I'm going to save this in that location. And now if I go back to File and Options and Save, my template location has now been set as the default location. Now, if I didn't do that, if I'd already set a common location, like a network location there, when I created the template, it would have gone into the location that I'd set there instead. Now, how do we use this? Well, actually, when we want to make a new report based on this template, we say File and New, and now we have a choice between the ones that are built into Office and my personal ones. So in my personal one, it has a template here, and I can click on that. Of course, give it a decent name, not just my template. And that will now make a new file based on that template. Now, there'll be no danger of overwriting the existing file because it's based upon that template. It's not the template itself. Okay, let's go back to this one. Now, on a similar vein, what you can also do is you can set different files in the start. Now that path there is actually going to work on anybody's computer. Now, if I take that path there and paste it into my file browser, it's not going to look the same because it's going to pick up my user's path to that location. Now, if I save a workbook in that location and I call it book as a template file, what it's going to do when I do Control N is it will make a new file from that template. It's not going to work when I say new blank workbook. That will open a new blank workbook. But if I do the shortcut Control N, it will make a new book from the template that I've saved in there called book. Now I could do the same thing with a sheet. I could put some custom settings or some actual data in a sheet, as long as I've saved it as a sheet template in the same location, which is the Excel start location. Whenever I hit the plus to make a new sheet, it's going to go in with that new sheet that I've set up. Now, the other thing you can do here is you can set a folder and it will open all the files in that folder when you start Excel. Now that's under File, Options, and Save. Nope, it's under Advanced. If I scroll down, I can see here at Startup, open all of the files in, and I can specify the folder there. Now, what you don't want to be doing is copying and pasting a bunch of files into that folder, because then they're not the same place as other people might be referring to. Maybe people want different files open. So what I do is I set a folder, and I will then put in that folder shortcuts to the files I want. Now, what that does is when Excel opens, it will open all of the files that have a shortcut in there. But if I then hit save for that file, it will save in its original location, which can be quite handy. Okay, now here's a bit of a bonus. We're looking at the Visual Basic editor now. So if I go down to the Visual Basic editor, Alt F11, because I'm getting old, I'm getting blind, and I can't see that. Now, more to the point, if I'm training a class and I've got people at the back of the room, they can't see that text there. Now, try as I might, I can do Control, roll the wheel on the mouse. That ain't going to do anything. I can do Control plus plus plus. That ain't going to do anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to go to Options, and I'm going to go to the Editor format. Now, what I'm going to do is say, make this text actually a size where my blind old eyes can read it. Now I can actually see that. But it's still not quite good enough for people at the back of a classroom, maybe. So I'm going to do another change here. I'm going to say Tools, Options, Editor. And on the left-hand side here, I can change the different types of text within this code window. And if I change my normal text to have a dark background, sorry, dark or light background, then that makes the text much easier to read from the back of a classroom. Okay, on a similar vein, we've got Power Query. Now within Power Query, we've got a bunch of things that we might want to do. I right-click there, say Get Data from Table or Range. That's going to open up my Power Query editor. Now the PQE, Power Query Editor, is basically another program that's opened up within Excel. Now we have some settings here, but the first thing I'm going to notice is, guess what? That's too small for my old eyes to read. So I'm going to zoom in. And if I do Control, roll the wheel on the mouse, it does nothing. Control plus does nothing. But Control Shift plus does actually zoom me in. So Control Shift plus lets me zoom in within the Power Query editor. That, I think, is a fantastic setting. But why didn't they just make it the same as every other program? Control plus or Control roll the wheel. Now, the other thing about this is it doesn't remember it. So if I come out of this window and come back into it, I then need to do that same command again. That would be great if they did. Now, the other thing in Power Query is a lot of people, the first thing they do in a query is they come across here and they delete the step, which is changing the type of data. Now, what this is where Power Query has automatically detected the data type within the data within each column. And if it's not what you want, people will delete that every single time. But rather than deleting it every time, why don't you go to File and Options and Settings, Query Options, and when it eventually comes up, on my data load, I can tell it to not detect the data types automatically. Now it does refer to structured and unstructured sources here. A structured source might be a database where somebody has actually gone and defined what data types are in each column of data. That's a structured source. Unstructured is pretty much anything else. But you might set it to not detect at all, yeah, because you might not want it to come in with the date types automatically. So say never detect, it's not going to detect it unless it's been manually defined by somebody from a database where they know it's right. Now, whilst we're in here, we might also want to change something else, which is, let me just close that down. Oh, I haven't got it on there. Go back into it. The other thing is changing where you load the data to by default. Yep. So if I go into my File and Options and Settings and the Query Options again, now where does it load the data to by default? In other words, if I just hit Load, where does it go to? Now the default is it loads it to a table on the worksheet. Now if I use the standard load settings, that's what it's going to do. It's not going to put it on the data model. It is going to put it in a table on the worksheet. And if you get bored of changing those options every single time you hit load and say close and load and a plot, whatever, and then you say don't load to the worksheet, load to the data model, just change the settings here. That will then be your default settings. You click OK. You don't have to change anything else in there. Okay, very last one that I've got, and this, as I said at the beginning, for Celia, especially for you. And this is looking at Excel Online. Now, I saw something from Celia today, looking at Excel Online. And what have we got here? Well, I've opened up Excel Online, and there's a few settings we can change here. Now, not many people are using Excel Online at the moment, but more and more people are going to start using it in the future. And we've got a few places we can make changes. And the first is before we actually open a file, so we've just got Excel itself open, we can come over here to the cog and click on there to apply some fancy colors or themes. Now you might want to do this, but if you do change the theme to that, it's gonna not look like Excel. And you probably do want it to look like Excel if it is Excel. Here also you can change your language if you do want to work in a different language, because if you've just gone to it online, they don't necessarily know where you're coming from. You don't necessarily have any regional settings. So you can change the language that everything is displayed in from there. Once you've actually opened a file, you've got a few other things you can change. The first thing I change is the ribbon, because by default it's going to show a reduced ribbon, or basically a one-line ribbon. And that's not great. It'll probably grow on me, but until it does, I'm going to turn it back so I can see the full ribbon. The next thing is we can actually go across and say File, and it's got options, but don't be expecting a lot from the options, because all we can do there is change our regional formatting settings. And you remember the formatting settings are things like how the dates appear and things like that. You almost certainly do want to change that when you start working with Excel Online. A couple of other things you can change. So we can go down to the bottom. This is the status bar, remember. We could right click on this and bring up a whole bunch of other stuff we could see down there. All we've got here is a tiny, tiny little arrow that you can just about see, and you can choose a few of the aggregation functions there. It would be good if we could choose some of the others, but we'll wait for that one. Okay. That's got us to the end of what I've got in Excel. So just to carry on now, if anybody's got any questions, any comments, anybody like to share what you do as your setup, then please just feel free to unmute yourselves and shout away. And just before I go, I'm going to say that's how you get hold of me. And the bit to remember is my name, Oakley Turvey. If you go onto YouTube, search for Oakley Turvey. Go onto LinkedIn, search for Oakley Turvey. Trust me, there's not many of them around. Okay, that's all I've got. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and people can jump in and start making comments.
Only one Oakley Turvey.
Hey,
Go on, mate.
hey, how much of that stuff could you take into DevOps in Azure, you think?
Say again, sorry?
I said, like, how much of that stuff could apply to DevOps, you think, for customization? Like for deployments of specific types of sheets and, worksheets?
I think actually most of it, because the specific sheets, I'm pretty sure that can be pushed out centrally, and then you just use a shared location for where the files are stored, so everybody gets the same files.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. I don't have any experience of that, so you'd have to listen to somebody who does.
All right. I was just wondering.
Was that Brett asking?
No, Brandon.
Oh, Brent Patterson.
Why would you think it was me?
Thanks, Oakley.
I can't see who's talking, that's all.
Cheers, Brandon.
Just having a look through the questions now, see if there's anything. Oh, there's loads of questions. Wow.
Yeah, there was one recently from Rajiv regarding a template. I don't know if you can you see it, can you, folks?
Scrolling down, where are we? If you have a template created and share it with your colleagues with your customized settings. When you say customized settings, I'm presuming you're meaning something like a theme. So the theme will travel with the workbook as well. So if you have a theme attached to a workbook, it'll be saved with your machine when you save it, but it's also part of that workbook. So if you then send that workbook to somebody else, the theme will be, they can then save that theme on their machine as well. I think that's probably what you meant.
Cool.
What do other people do?
Hi, Oakley.
Hey, Celia, what do you do?
Here. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of nice tips. Some of them I haven't thought of them for a long time. Others I didn't use. And I already changed a couple of things here while you were doing
Spreadsheet.
Was that on your Excel Online stuff, was it?
Sorry?
Was that on the Excel Online stuff?
No, I don't want to go there anytime soon. Unless I have to. One of the things I like to do also on the options is to change the autosave to save every 1 minute. Just because I freak out that Excel.
Yeah, what you've got to be careful of doing that, and I understand why you're doing that, but what you've got to be careful of is if you do have a large workbook, which might take quite a long time to calculate, or if you've got a query in it with stuff that takes time to refresh, what you don't want is you don't want it to be halfway through saving whilst you're doing a refresh, because you get a conflict between them. So just be cautious of that.
Yeah, but well, even if I have that for 10 minutes, save every time 10 minutes, it can happen that the saving will fall at the exact moment I'm running the query. So
it will do, but what I'm trying to say is that if you, when you're doing the save, sometimes it freezes up the screen for a few moments.
Okay,
and the save itself is going to take 50 seconds. You're only going to have 10 seconds of working time in every minute.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, for long files, it could be, for bigger files, it could be a problem. I can see that. That's the point. Yeah. I was going to say, about changing the language on Excel Online, for someone who may be doing that the first time, it can be a little bit difficult. At least it was for me, because if you are changing the language, it will reflect right away on most of the things in Office. If you do that online, office.com will change the language. But in Excel, the display language in Excel doesn't change right away. So then you need to close everything, close your browser, and then log in again. And hopefully one time will be enough. Sometimes you need to go back and forth a little. I don't know if it just takes some time to.
I think it takes time to feed through because the settings are actually server settings.
Exactly. So
and it's the same if you go into the server settings and you enable automation for different users. So you're enabling people to use the automate features. It might take some time to feed through. Yes,
so that can be probably the cause of the issue. So if someone is trying to change the language and it doesn't change right away, don't the display language for Excel, don't despair. Just be patient and persistent.
Go and have a coffee and wait 10 hours.
Log off and close everything and then come back in a few minutes. It should be okay.
Yeah. There's a comment from Rajiv, and he's talking about the options when you're using get pivot data. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You can go in there and uncheck the get pivot data, but you've got to be really careful because the get pivot data is not a cell reference. Get pivot data will refer to what is in the cell in that pivot table at that point in time when you do it. So if you then change the structure of the data or the pivot table, you'll still be getting the same answer. Whereas if you refer to the cell, you're getting what's now in the cell, not what was in the cell when you set it up. So you can come unstuck sometimes when you do that. Yeah, but if that is what you want, then go in and uncheck get pivot data. Brent will clarify that when he's talking about cube functions, as he's going to do.
He is indeed. I've got a question for any Power Query people.
Can I talk?
Yeah, go for it, Karen.
Hey, Karen.
Hey, thank you for your presentation. And when I started to making presential classes, the trick that you talk about, change the direction of enter when you press enter. They told me this function, it's work just for beginners to make joke with beginners in Excel. You
I kind of agree with you because I personally still use Control Enter because actually there's much more functionality on the Control Enter. So if you've got a whole range of cells selected and you're in edit mode, so if you've done F2 to go into edit mode, if you edit the function and then do Control Enter, it updates everything in your selection. So there's lots of reasons to use Control Enter, but you know it can get a bit tedious pressing Enter all the time and then going back to the cell that you've just come out from.
Yes,
but
I use it in a job. The worksheet was horizontally. I cannot change this. Karen, you cannot change it, but I can change the direction of enter. It helped me a lot.
You changed it to going to the right, did you?
Yes, to right. It helped me a lot. So it's not just for beginners.
Yeah, with a lot of these things, if you know where they are, then you can go in and change them just for, you know, a 15-minute job on one worksheet and then change them back again.
Yes.
But if you're not familiar with changing them at all in the first place, even if you know they're there, you can forget they're there. Like all that stuff on the status bar. It's amazing when I'm training and people don't know that it's there. And, you know, I select a range of numbers and I say to people, what's the average of all those numbers? And they look at me like I'm crazy. And then I say, but it's written on the screen. Just, you need to know where to look. Yeah.
Yes. It's like when you have a lot of knives and you know how to use these knives to each situation, you know, it's expand your mind. Thank you.
No worries.
Do you find you get a lot of support for styling of spreadsheets? I remember in the past commenting about how companies would spend a fortune over their stationery, their PowerPoint styles, the image they wish to project, and then you came to Excel and it was just pure garbage as usual.
100%. I agree with you there. And the thing that I've come across, and I work with a huge number of different companies, they kind of forget Excel. Now, it's not that they forget Excel, it's that they don't tell people that they can do it in Excel. So if you actually read their style guides, that is probably a 100 page, huge document of style guides of what you should do.
Total overkill.
And examples of templates in Excel and PowerPoint till they're coming out of your ears. And sometimes they're really well written. Most of the time they're not worth the paper or the PDF file they're written in. But yeah, Excel kind of gets forgotten. And then people come to me and say, well, every time I copy and paste a chart from Excel into PowerPoint, I then have to go through and change all the colors again.
Yeah,
no, you don't.
I remember the old, is it 2003, where the charts always came out in magenta, a pale yellow, and
now if you open an XLS file, you're still going to get those colors.
Really,
you're right, it's from 2003.
Really
and
disgusting.
You have got a choice now of changing it. See, one of the options in the settings there, near where the colors are, is you can change the color settings for those old files. But you should never have to do that, because you should never be using an XLS file.
Yeah,
unless you work for Public Health England.
But I've seen some very smart corporate reports, and it just comes down to this default colors, and they think, no, please.
And most of the time, it's not. It's just lack of knowledge. No one's shown them how to do it. So how would they be expected to figure it out unless someone's shown them?
Yeah. Yeah, the number of times that I'm only interested in the numbers. And I said, well, the way you've generated them is crap and they look awful. Apart from that,
Hey, Oakley, you should look in the chat real quick.
Where's that?
What was that?
We got a petition going for you right now.
What's that all about? Oh yeah, definitely. Well, the thing about trashing the government bodies, I'm not sure that it was reported really badly. NHS England got a huge amount of grief over what they did, but it was reported completely wrong. It was reported that they used XLS, and that was the problem. I think the problem was actually they saved it as a CSV from Excel, and they lost extra sheets. So anybody could correct me if they know better.
If I can add one more thing relating to this, like when I was in KPMG, I remember that specifically there were instructions from the KPMG headquarters, and it was implemented around the globe that we can't create accounts, financial statements, and Excel due to certain, the mishaps in the numbers, formats, and stuff like that. So what we were doing at the last days that we have to convert all our Excel workings of the financial statements into Microsoft Word and then format there and stuff like that. So
but it's really, it's not really the software's fault. I always try and train people, and I say, you can work as hard as you like. You're making VBA, you're writing something really complex. You're putting data validation and conditional formatting on it, but don't ever think you can make it idiot-proof. You can make stuff idiot-resistant. You can't make it idiot-proof, because you can put these data validation everything in there, and someone's just going to copy and paste into there. And it's really, really difficult to actually make it really resistant so people can't break it. And just when you think you've got it right, someone will come up with a new wonderful way of breaking your magic spreadsheet.
Quote I liked was that no matter how idiot-proof I make the code, the company can always find a finer class of idiots.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true, but it's kind of like an arms race. It's our job to actually try and stay a step ahead of them.
From the higher management.
My techniques used to be to everything should be an array formula, and it all should be hidden in defined names. And with a bit of luck, the clients never found the code.
Yeah, on one of the previous sessions, I think it was Paula who was saying that she doesn't see a need for very hidden worksheets. Yeah, that's a really good reason for a very hidden worksheet, so people don't know it's there and they can't find it.
I've got a button that just takes the 20 sheets and hides 18 of them. And then there's another secret button that takes you to cell A1. And if you type a special word in cell A1, it runs a macro that opens it all up. But I'm hoping that none of the end users find that.
What do they call them? Cheat codes?
Yeah, it's just a worksheet change macro. But if it's got to be that particular cell, and it's got to be a particular word, because actually going in via VBA is a bit painful.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people say to me, well, you can write some VBA that will mean that they, it's going to check to see if the data validation is still on the cell after they've pasted. And if it's not, then it's going to come up with a dialog box. But what about if they haven't enabled macros? It's not going to be running that macro. It's not going to be running that VBA. Yeah. So you can have another script that says they have to run the macros, otherwise they're not going to see anything. It's it's like I say, it's an arms race.
Yeah.
We're going to win.
One way, Oakley, is to tell people, this is Dick Moffat.
Yeah, hi.
Is tell people if they break it, they'll get fired. And actually, that's true. If it's an important enough application to the business, just tell them these are the things that you should not do. And if you do them, you're going to be in trouble, right? There has to be a certain amount of acceptance of responsibility on the part of the user. Right? I mean, but I still use protection, and I still use fancy macros. In fact, Celia and I were talking about just a couple of days ago, ways to make sure that the file is opening from the correct location.
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
Open somewhere else, right?
So it's not just opening a copy that they've had emailed to them from somewhere else.
Exactly. If it opens up and says, "Oh, this isn't in the right spot," poof, out you go. That's a great thing. But one of the biggest problems I have is I can protect a model from everything except one thing. If they open 2 instances of Excel and they copy from one into my spreadsheet, even if my spreadsheet is locked and protected, any unprotected cells will receive what's pasted in, and it will also replace the formatting in the unprotected cells. It'll just break the file completely. That's genuine risk. Do you understand what I mean? Like you have
I do, and that's kind of like the example I was saying. You can have some code that runs, that examines those specific cells to see what formatting, what conditional formatting, what data validation is still on them after someone's pasted.
Well, that's what I've done. What you do is you say, is every cell in this worksheet got the same formatting as it's supposed to, right? That's a lot of work, but I'll do it sometimes.
But some people see it as a challenge as well.
And sometimes it's not worth it, because how much are they paying you for that, right? I mean, that's either in terms of how much your day is how much they assign to you doing this work as one, or if you're a consultant, how much are they willing to pay, right? So,
and tied in with that as well is, you might be working for them as a consultant, and by protecting it, you're actually making their lives slightly more difficult. And you might get resistance from a fairly senior manager who says, no, my guys are not going to do it this way. And you, the consultant coming in, you can't really argue with that.
Then you're on your own once I give it to you. Right? That's what you have to tell them, that you're on your own, man.
Yeah.
Is there a way to override that?
Override what?
Do you go above the senior manager, or do you have to stay at that level?
Oh, it depends who you're working with, what company you're working with. So I worked with one company and they were using Microsoft Project. And this is another government organization who I'm not going to name. But they were working with Microsoft Project, and they had a policy that, from the top down, that everybody would use Microsoft Project for their projects, except for a couple of departments whose head of department said, no, we're not going to bother, we're going to use Excel. So how can you, it's not your position as an outsider coming in as a consultant to get involved in the internal politics. You've just got to try and make it robust enough to cope with it.
Right.
So basically you have to stay kind of at a balance.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
You have to work with people who are responsible. That's the bottom line.
Where do you find them?
Used to find them all the time.
People are responsible and with deep pockets who can afford to pay for you.
Everybody knows everything themselves, right? So they used to just rely on your skill, and now tell you what they want rather than telling you what they need, and then you decide how to do it. We could have a whole section about that change in attitude, right? Everybody has an opinion of how things should be done, and you're an Excel person, you come in. No, it's really, experience tells me it should be done that way. I used to find everybody accepted my expertise.
I think it's the same in any industry. I mean, like, you go into the doctor and, the doctors get fed up with people saying, oh, I Googled my symptoms and this is what's wrong with me. And it's like, yeah, 7 years of medical college and you go and Google it. Yeah. So I think it's the same with any kind of expertise. Everyone else thinks they know better than you.
But I think Excel is getting worse that way. That's all.
Till everything falls apart, at least, and then you have to fix it.
Yeah, keeps us in work there, doesn't it?
Pretty much, good job security, if nothing else.
It's a bit like Oz de Soleil going on about, oh yeah, I dream of the day when we're going to have clean data everywhere. Yeah, then we'll all be out of a job, because most of our work is cleaning other people's data.
We'll just make new data. We'll be fine.
Yeah, they'll always find new ways of breaking stuff as well.
Once you get a solution in, you should let them know in no uncertain terms that they need you more than you need them.
And if you're not doing it because you need to eat, then that's always true. So if you're actually doing it because you like doing it and you like the challenge, then you're at a huge advantage because you can kind of dictate a lot of stuff. Whereas if you really need the job, you have to do what they say and take the money.
No, or have enough clients that you can fire clients from time to time.
Well, that's true as well, yeah.
With Excel, everyone's an expert these days, aren't they? Because they've all been on an advanced Excel course about 10 years ago.
This is a big discussion for the internet, is what classifies someone as being advanced and, what classifies someone as an expert. Now, we've got to remember also an expert, X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So, that's what an expert is. Now, anyone who says to me they're an Excel expert, I say, okay, so you've obviously got the certificate from your MOS exam, because that's the only thing that will qualify you as an Excel expert. And I was saying to Alan before the session, I trained a company the other week. This wasn't a government organization, you'd be pleased to hear. And at the beginning of the session, I was warned that they were all really, really advanced Excel users, and I needed to pitch it at the right level. I think there was one person in the room who knew what an Excel table was. So that's how brilliantly advanced they were. But, you've got different people's definitions of advanced. Compared to the HR person who booked the course, they were massively advanced. But compared to most of this audience, they probably would be, viewed as school children still.
I worked on a project about 12 months ago where I was told that that they didn't want any of that fancy index match stuff, just stick with VLOOKUP. And I was like,
oh dear.
I mean, it's the one. Like,
you can't argue with that, really, can you?
If VLOOKUP's the only thing you want, it's, you can get a lot of people to do that. You don't need me.
Yeah. It's only going to take half an hour, but I'll stretch it out to a day if you want.
You should give them a new option of XLOOKUP, Mark.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll scare them too much, man.
Now, take it back to HLOOKUP. They'll like that.
It's amazing, again, when I ask people, we're doing a VLOOKUP in a class, and I say to people, okay, so what does VLOOKUP mean? And I'm like, well, it's a way of looking up a value. And I'm saying, okay, so what would HLOOKUP mean? And they look at me like I'm from another planet. I say, well, V, the vertical. H, what would H be?
Horizontal.
Horizontal, of course it is. And what was the function before then? Well, there was one that was just called a lookup.
Then what will be XLOOKUP?
It just means you're looking at the sky. Don't worry about it.
X is extra lookup.
Okay,
XLOOKUP is what you do on Facebook.
Facebook.
If VLOOKUP is complicated, they should find out about the left anti-join and right anti-join and go to Power Query or related in DAX, even easier.
Yeah. They've never even heard of Power Query.
Then even you should show them the 7th join, Christian.
Bring up row context to make their heads explode.
To get to the join, you have to know them all. So
craziness.
But
how much is everyone using the Let's function these days?
I had a look at a video from Mike Girvin the other day, and I got about 20 seconds into it, and I think my head exploded. Mike Girvin Excel is fun on YouTube. I'm sure everybody's.
It was his explanation was stupidly complicated. It doesn't need to be.
The function itself was unbelievable, but I got to about, like I say, 10 seconds in, and I had no idea what it was. I was like, oh my god, this is brilliant, but it's beyond me. So to answer your question, I'm not using let, not yet.
I always start with let, and
I can see the use for it.
And then when I understand the problem, and I think, oh hell, the end user doesn't have 365, I then start dismantling it and breaking up the arrays and just making it, just generally trashing it until I get back to something standard.
But if you can use helper cells and helper columns for your partial formulas, that's kind of like a let anyway.
It is. Yeah,
so an index and match, you could have the match separately in another cell. Doesn't have to be nested.
But you know, the people that's always talking about chart junk. Well, you've got sheets junk. That's what helper ranges are. They're sheet junk. They distract the user from the numbers they ought to be looking at.
Yeah, and more to the point, they slow stuff down. But now we're getting into the realms of working on bigger and bigger and bigger spreadsheets. And what we don't want is formulas that are calculating the same thing multiple times.
Yeah.
And that's really where let comes into its own.
Yeah.
Because it's already calculated. And so it just refers to the answer it's already got, kind of like a cube.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, that is what helper cells did as well. But at the expense of they all had to be rendered and they had to take up space. And that
on that hidden worksheet, which is
or 2D arrays on a set of 50 hidden sheets.
Paula was laughing away there for some reason. Just very happy, that's all it is.
Just keep throwing in the jigs about the very hidden sheets.
So it might have been my old organization if you're working for governments once. That I worked for an organization that has bits near you.
No, it's not near me though. I was working, unfortunately. It was in Salisbury. That give you a clue.
Not the joy of pre-kinetic.
Hey, Oakley.
Hey.
So something I was wondering, do you have some kind of cheat sheet by chance?
Cheat sheet for what? I can share the actual Excel file with you if you want, and you can run through that list of things.
Well, yeah, but I was thinking like something smaller.
To do with what?
Personally? You know, like tips, tricks, stuff like that.
Do you know what? I've never put something like that together. I probably should. I've got one for the business, and we use it, and it's just it's really like where stuff is in Excel as a basic level, and some quick keyboard shortcuts. But I prefer to tell people how to find a keyboard shortcut, so hovering over a button or something like that. Rather than giving them a big long list of keyboard shortcuts, which they might never use most of them.
Or worse still, they might use them and put them in the wrong order.
Say again, sorry, Peter.
I was just saying, worse still, they use them, but in the wrong place, having forgotten which one it was meant to be, suddenly delete half a sheet by mistake.
Yeah, and again, that's one reason why I don't use keyboard shortcuts on any macros or VBA. Because they're always going to replace a keyboard shortcut that's already there that somebody might be familiar with using, and they'll then use their favorite keyboard shortcut and run my macro and wipe off half what they've done.
You know, someone in the chat had mentioned assigning keyboard shortcuts to your mouse. Do you ever do that?
No. No, having said that, no, I don't. But I've got a mouse that I do have that already on, because I've got a 5-button mouse, and I use it when I'm on the internet, like on YouTube. It's got a back button and a forward button to go back to a previous page or forward page, and things like that. So I suppose that is like a keyboard shortcut on the mouse, but I've not set that up. That was built into it.
Yeah, pretty big gamer here, so I do that a lot.
So you've probably got a 15-button mouse.
Yeah, I'm playing the new Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Got the whole thing macroed. Like, Fun game. You should try it. Anyway.
I'll have to give it a go. Yeah, someone's just asking, Dominic's asking about that Excel file. What I can do is I can send that to Alan and he can stick it up on the website.
Yeah.
So anybody who wants that file can download it. I mean, it's really, there's nothing in the file. And, you know, a couple of the magic buttons that I clicked to switch from PowerPoint to Excel and to open up the file that I had as a template file, they're not going to work on your machines because they're going to refer to a different location to where my files are. But I'll send it to Alan and he can share it with everybody. Just make sure you take my name off it and don't say I said so. Make out it was your idea.
Cool. Yep. Cheers, Dominic.
Alan, were there any questions on the YouTube?
There's one or two. I mean, one of them's only kind of like semi-related. Just somebody asking about using Excel with SharePoint. Like their company does it like a lot, and he was saying about the a problem with not being able to merge changes.
Presumably because of the way SharePoint's managing the version control. Not sure.
Nah. So it's a bit outside the scope of this. I don't think there was. Just scrolling through it now.
Have anyone tried out the list, the new list in the SharePoint, what they have brought it?
Sorry, buddy?
Microsoft list.
It exists, but it's no better than SharePoint list.
Yeah.
Just going to ask earlier when we were talking about, you know, when you were in Power Query doing customizing.
Yeah.
Does anybody know on here, if it's even possible, when you're in Power Query and you group your queries, yeah, on the left, and then you collapse them, and you close the editor, and you come back in, and they're always open, don't they? Like, can you stop that? Is there a way of saying like stop opening my folders?
I don't think so, because all the helper queries are open as well.
Yes, it's annoying. Yeah. You tell them all to hide, and you leave. You come back in, and they open up again. Everyone, little things. My rant about Excel Online is a lot longer.
You could go and have a conversation with Celia about that.
You don't want me to get into that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to need help on Excel Online. That's a company that I've written spreadsheets for wants them moved. And my code is full of little bits of VBA. So you click shapes and on action, or left and right arrows that do a mouse move, but that turns a number, notches a number up or down. And you know, as far as I can make out, anything I do is going to be stymied and won't work.
What you've got to be careful of is if they do make some changes and they save it, it's not just that they might not be able to run the VBA. By them saving it, they might be saving it without the VBA.
Yes. Yeah.
So it might actually cause damage to your sheet. Just be really careful of that, because I know somebody who did that to one of mine. They opened it in numbers on a one of those dreaded white machines, and they then resaved it as an Excel file, but it didn't have any code on it, and it was worthless.
Yeah. I was hoping to be able to use the new scripting stuff to handle names, because although it works with names, you can't define them. And so I thought if I just put the name and what it refers to, and then says load this up with a script, but I'm immediately getting into fairly heavy waters without being sure that's the way through it is clear through it.
Yeah, you basically need to learn a new language, isn't it? Yeah.
And you've only got part of the object model there, and some things to work and a lot doesn't. So that may be painful, but look for new challenges.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things. I'm going to delay it because I was at school in the 80s, and We did computer studies.
Never.
But we didn't actually have. Yeah, I'm a 60s baby. 60s baby, me. But we didn't actually have computers. We were doing computer studies, but we didn't have computers. So they gave us typewriters, and they told us we need to learn to type. And I looked at this and I said, I'm not going to learn to type because, you know, we're going to be talking to computers in a couple of years. That was in the 80s. You know, we've only just started to talk to computers now. I'm kind of in the same mode with this Office script. I'm probably going to delay until, you know, it does it for me.
I still find typing a fairly useful skill. You know, communicating with my computer. They never seem to understand me when I talk to them.
My phone does all the time. And my phone, I'm halfway through a class and my phone suddenly pops up and says, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. What did you say? Oh, hang on, why are you listening?
So just replying something, guys. I knew Brent was going to say something about Office scripts.
He said it. He's put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay. Where's that?
Office script is good working with Power Platform. I agree. It is good. Yeah, I'm kind of joking on saying I'm giving up on Office script. I'm not giving up on it. I'm resisting it. What I want is somebody to write something that would translate all of my VBA into Office script without me having to learn a new language.
Yeah, I don't think you'll really need to do that. I think this is going to be more for new things going forward if you're very specific use cases. Most things will still be VBA. Unless they push Power Apps in place of VBA forms, in which case all bets are up.
I think there'll still be VBA. I think VBA is going to be around for a long time still to come. I think because it's so ingrained in what everybody does. You know, we could turn around and say, yeah, well, we don't need horse and cart anymore because we've all got cars. You know, there's places in the world where people use horse and cart.
What I'd love to know is when Excel 4 macros went away, did people get angry with Excel 4 macros going away? Like this is going way.
Surely no one's old enough to remember that. Not even me.
Probably had fewer users at the time, but it was more arcane even then.
Hey, Faz.
Little character.
Perez too.
Yeah.
Mini me.
Alan, he loves you very much. Whenever he sees your picture, he
My
asks
name
me,
is Mohammad Nidar.
Hello.
Hello, then.
Looking good, Fraz. Keeping well, mate.
Yep. He was watching your session, Oakley.
How much of that was stuff you knew, you used to know, and you've forgotten already?
A lot.
I find the one VBA editor, turning that background.
Yeah.
And the interesting one was with the Power Query Control-Shift-M, Control-Shift-Plus.
Control-Shift-Plus. Yeah,
Yes.
that's fantastic. I only learned that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was on one of the other meetup groups.
Yes.
And then I went to another meetup group, which was in Vancouver with Ken Pools.
Yes.
And he was desperately trying to zoom in and he couldn't. And I was shouting at the screen. I was saying Control-Shift-Plus, Control-Shift-Plus. And then I realized it was YouTube and he couldn't hear me. But yeah. Somebody else came in and told him. And the other person had learned it from one of Ken's colleagues on Ken's website. So I think that's a great thing about these meetups is we're sharing, we're all learning from each other and just spreading what we know.
Hey, Oakley.
Yeah.
Are you going to do another one in the next couple months?
No, I'm going to be asleep probably for about 3 weeks.
Hibernate, huh? Cool.
Why is that? What do you want to hear?
I was wondering.
I've got nothing else planned now. I have to do some paid work every now and then as well.
Every now and then.
Let it build up.
Mm.
Oh, it's a big comment.
Yeah, there's a comment in there about old languages. Yeah, the Fortran and COBOL particularly. And I'm not sure about the earning potential, because otherwise everybody would be trying to learn those languages. And I would say the learning curve for lots of new languages are quite steep. And so just by the time you finish learning that new language, there might suddenly be a glut of people who've done the same thing at the same time, and the prices go through the floor. So, you know, you might have to be very careful about learning a language. Learn it because you want to learn that language, not because you think you're going to make loads of money from it. But yeah, there's definitely lots of companies using old systems that need those old languages. But if you make yourself a specialist in that thing and OfficeScript takes off, you might lose all of your work overnight. So just be slightly cautious of that kind of thing, I think. And certainly don't expect to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars as a programmer.
The wise owl of Oakley.
No, it's just been there. I've had lots of plans that are going to make me hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. None of them have worked.
Not yet. Not yet. No comment.
Mine are all still a work in progress too.
There's a good comment there from Gareth, though, is it's the training companies who make the money. So, you know, in the gold rush, they say the people who made the most money were the ones selling shovels. And kind of a good analogy here. You know, if you're the one training other people how to learn these old languages, yeah, your skill is training, not necessarily the language. And that skill is very transferable.
Indeed. Right, we'll probably wrap this up if everyone's done.
Thanks very much, Oakley. That was awesome.
No worries.
Thank you, Oakley. It was great.
Thanks, Rose.
Presentation.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks.
Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah.
On cubes.
That's Toronto. That's next week, and I don't know what sort of crazy person's doing that. Feel sorry for him.
Who's next here? Is it Paula?
Yeah.
Am I next? Yeah.
Fantastic pivot tables.
Yeah, next. Say it with a bit more enthusiasm, Paula.
Yeah.
Everybody has to wear Christmas jumpers. It'll be December.
No, I've got my XL t-shirt to wear.
No Christmas jumpers. It has to be Christmas jumpers.
Question: does Tim Burton count?
I'm going to wear a t-shirt so I can pretend it's hot.
So,
all right, listen, everybody. Thanks very much. Good night.
Cheers, Paula.
Bye.
Bye. See you later, guys.
See you. Bye bye.